So we're about to head in to watch Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Naturally, this is one of our most anticipated films of the year, but also a movie I'm just very curious about because they were dealt such a bad hand, but it feels like they poured a lot of passion into this project to try and get it right. So I can't wait to check this one out. How are you feeling about it?
Man, I'm just so excited to see Ironheart and Namor introduced on screen, so really hoping this doesn't suck.
Right. Hope it doesn't suck. Hopefully it's an amazing way to end Phase 4, which has been kind of mediocre. We're going to watch it, then we'll let you know what we thought about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your excitement level for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and what have you thought about Phase 4 in general? This will be a spoiler-free review, but be careful down below in the comment section. People like to spoil movies for other people, so you have been warned about what they will do down below. With that said, let's get started with the good. As I said in my intro, I've had a lot of frustrations with Phase 4 of the MCU. Now, I've enjoyed a number of the projects, but it feels like it's not reaching the heights of the previous phases. It doesn't feel as cohesive and focused. There's not that excitement that was there, especially in Phase 3, and it has by far the highest percentage of total misfires of any of the phases in the MCU, and so many of the projects feel like they were directed by a committee. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is a return to form. It doesn't feel like all these other Phase 4 projects. It feels like a movie made by a storyteller with a singular vision, not a movie composed by a committee trying to make it for the broadest possible audience. It was the movie I hoped it would be. Now, if you've been following my coverage of Black Panther: Wakanda Forever leading up to the release, you know I've had a lot of concerns about this film. I was a big fan of the first movie, but they were dealt such a bad hand. I can't imagine too many things worse happening to a production than the star of your franchise dying in the middle of a pandemic. And that's the hand that they were dealt. And I just wasn't sure, how do you continue moving forward without recasting? What do you do? Especially without them pausing for any real length of time, significant amount of time, the production to regroup and come up with a new plan. And having seen the movie, you can see how this is probably the basic story that they wanted to tell all along. You can imagine the other version of this movie that would have starred T'Challa as the lead character, but they just did a masterful job of finding a way to tell this story that feels like the natural next step after the first Black Panther film. A number of things that happen in that movie involving Wakanda's relationship to the rest of the world. That's the foundation for the plot of this film. Everything that was already there has this new weight to it that runs throughout the entire runtime of the film, because you know all of our lead characters are still in mourning, dealing with this loss while facing this new outside threat. And along these same lines, the movie functions essentially as an ensemble where all the side characters from the previous film are now promoted to being co-leads of this film, and where they had like mini arcs previously. Here, all of them have the same journey of dealing with the loss of T'Challa while trying to hold the kingdom together, but they all deal with it in their own ways in light of their specific roles and their personalities. And it just gives each of them an opportunity to kind of like tee off as actors, because they're in such emotional situations where there's so much tension, so much conflict, and there's not a clear answer and resolution to the situation that they're in. And so that just makes for just compelling cinema, because you care about the characters, you're invested in the situation, and all of it feels like it matters and has stakes on a personal level as well as a grand scale level. And when I say grand scale, it's right there in the title. This is a movie about a nation, Wakanda. And the very end of the first Black Panther, Wakanda kind of reveals themselves to the world. And because of that, it's a movie that has a lot of like global politics interwoven into it. It doesn't get bogged down in like, committee meetings or anything like that, but it has to do with the ramifications of Wakanda putting themselves on the world map as someone with a valuable commodity. And because of that, there's all these different tensions that has this very large scale sense to it without needing to have a supervillain looking to blow up a city. That's the way so many of these comic book movies try to like raise the stakes, is like, we've got a guy that wants to blow up a city with a sky beam or something like that. Here, it has to do with kind of real world reactions that nations have to valuable resources and their own insecurities and their own desire for power. That drives the conflict, the tension, the story here, where you have all these different people concerned about this valuable stuff, vibranium. And that's very much what I appreciate about this film, as well as the previous Black Panther, is that it delivers all of the action that you want, the comic book stuff that you want, but it also just tells a story that's a bit more mature. Kind of has more layers to it than simply, we got to go beat up and catch the bad guy that wants to blow up the thing or take over the thing. Kind of incorporates this understanding of the way the world works, and it's about a nation, a kingdom, and people trying to make the best choices when there's no obvious, clear, right answer. Another big thing to talk about would be our new characters, in particular Namor and Ironheart. I don't want to go too many specifics for the obvious reasons, but when it comes to Namor, they find a way to right out of the gate just establish him as a physical threat to individuals, as well as what he represents is a threat to Wakanda as a whole, where he has a way to actually damage them, and he's ruthless enough, violent enough that you know he will act on his threats. But then in his characterization, he has an affable side to him as well, in which case he can be kind of fun and charming in interactions, but you always know he is dangerous. And there's a point in time where they kind of, you flesh out exactly kind of what's going on with him. Why does he view the world the way he does? Why is he responding the way he does? So they do kind of flesh him out a little bit to give him enough to where you understand where this person is coming from, why they're behaving that way. And our other new character in here is Ironheart, and she's going to get her own show. I don't know if it's next year or the year after that, but it's on the way. And I think they did a nice job of introducing her to where she doesn't dominate the film. She's not stealing screen time from our returning characters from the Black Panther franchise. She's a little bit of a plot device character, where there's the person that knows how to do the thing that kind of gets wrapped up in the story. And so it introduces her. You get to know a bit about her, and you see her personality, and she's kind of fun. She gets her moments to stand out. She has a presence all throughout the film. She's important to the film, but she doesn't dominate it. She doesn't pull away from the things that are most important. So it's a nice little introduction that makes you go, it's like a nice tease that makes you go, okay, yeah, I guess I would like to see more of that character and kind of flesh that person out, understand who they are, what makes them tick, and see them on their own little adventures. Like just the right amount to tease someone that will have a more important role without feeling shoehorned in, without feeling forced, but like the right way to do it in a way that made sense in light of the plot of this film. Final thing to talk about here is that they were able to find a way to tell a cohesive story in light of the fact that their lead actor died, that they were filming during a pandemic, that it has a lot of moving parts, where there's all these different nations, they're introducing new characters, they're dealing with a lot of emotional weight of a bunch of different things that happen, and they were able to pull it together into a cohesive story. They were able to take something as horrifically tragic as the lead actor dying, and in a sense use that to honor him, but also just amplify the movie and make everything in it better. And they allowed Ryan Coogler to tell it the way he wanted to tell it. There's humor sprinkled in the movie. There's absolutely entertainment value, but it doesn't undercut the drama. It's not overpowering the film. He was allowed to tell the story the right way. They were dealt a terrible hand, and they absolutely were able to pull it off. But there's a few things in here that didn't fully work for me, and it might not be for everyone. So let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. The big thing here is that it is a very mature, emotional, weighty film, which I personally would say is a very good thing for this movie. That's what it should be. That's what it is. But that's also to say that it's not designed for the broadest possible audience. And so it might not be for some people, that some of your children that you might normally take to an MCU film. I personally will be taking my 8 and 10-year-olds to see it Thursday night, and it probably will test them a little bit in terms of just the level of its maturity, the pace at which it moves, and the weight of the emotions. But it can't possibly go as bad as the time that we took them to A Dog's Way Home. And I'm not joking, when we took our kids to that movie, it was rough. Pun intended. They absolutely lost it and were crying like crazy. So yeah, we learned don't take our kids to dog movies. Other thing to talk about in the mix section, there is a mid-credit scene. No post-credit scene. There's one mid-credit scene. It is important. You absolutely want to stay for it. It does follow up on something that's important. So definitely stick around for it. But it's in line with the tone of the rest of the movie. If you're looking for this big gigantic tease cameo fest, it's not that, but it is a very important film that just fits with the emotional tone of the rest of the film. From there, let's move on to the bad. First thing that comes to mind here is that the plotting in the middle is a little bit clunky. There's a lot of characters, plot points, locations, and when you move into the middle of the film, the focus shifts to like entirely different characters, and someone takes over driving the plot forward, and other characters kind of disappear for a little bit, and then there's exposition dumps happening. So there's just a lot of stuff taking place, so it gets a bit muddled in the middle of the film and loses a bit of its focus because there's just so much happening. Likewise, there's definitely some cool action sequences in here, and when you see Wakanda under attack, it's big, it's epic, it's awesome. But I don't think I'm crazy about the way Ryan Coogler shoots the action in his movies, where I feel like there's cooler things happening that I'm able to decipher from the way that he kind of shoots it and handles the camera and things like that. And likewise, I like the third act in this movie much more than I like the third act in the first Black Panther, but they just chose a really odd location and setting for the actual big gigantic battle that makes it feel smaller than it probably actually is. And it feels smaller than a previous sequence that happened in the film. And I just thought that was a bit of an odd choice. Another one in here is, as you kind of move into the third act, there's a lot of, hey, look, we just invented some new technology that we've never tested on anyone before. Here, put on this thing and go and use it. And everyone's a master at this brand new thing that was invented the day before. There's just a lot of that. And because there's so much of it taking place, you notice it. I mean, MCU's always had that stuff, but there's a lot of it that takes place moving into the third act of this movie. And the final one on here, I felt like there was more to explore with Namor. It was like almost right there to being like, oh, that's really interesting. Like it introduces ideas and a journey there that was like, okay, I gotcha. And it felt like there was some obvious next steps to take. There are certain things in his worldview to be explored, some hypocrisies to be pointed out that the movie doesn't quite go there, and it could have, and it felt like missed opportunities, and so the character wasn't quite as fleshed out and didn't have quite the journey that I think could have been there. But in general, like I said, this is a solid MCU film and possibly the best of Phase 4. After the movie, I sat down with my buddy Andy, and here's what he had to say about it. So we just got done watching Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. What did you think about it?
Well, I loved it. I loved it. Right. I mean, you know, it's one of those movies that I hyped up, but was still kind of iffy on because, you know, you don't know if it's gonna just outdo the first one or just be okay, and then
and they were dealt such a bad hand.
Exactly,
it's like a really difficult situation to be in, and they pulled it off.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, though, right? Is they had so much going on. They had Ironheart, they had Atlantis, Namor. They had, once again, you know, they had this whole what do we do when T'Challa passes, when the king passes, and they handled it all excellently. I thought it was a great way to end Phase 4. It was just an awesome send-off for Chadwick Boseman. It was an awesome introduction to so many parts of the MCU to come. I mean, we have mutants now, we have Namor, Atlantis, and all the little politics that delve into that. I loved it.
So there's just like a lot of moving parts, and they're dealing with the passing of their lead actor.
Yes.
And it actually incorporates smoothly. It fits and makes sense. And that's what was so impressive to me, is that it had all those parts and you're still like, this feels cohesive. There's a lot going on, a lot being introduced, but it still comes together and doesn't feel like what it actually was, which was like, man, what are we going to do with this really bad hand being dealt in the middle of a pandemic?
Right.
You don't feel that while you're watching the movie.
It also felt like they weren't just trying to cram in as many jokes per minute as possible, which is what I felt with just about all of Phase 4. It felt like, oh, let's have a joke here and there where it makes sense contextually, or, let's like have a stop and get back to dealing with actual story elements, or let's not make little quips or jokes between the antagonists of the film or while they're fighting or anything like that. It just felt like there was, I almost want to say, like, kind of like some gravity to it. Like, they were treating it like a film, not just a superhero movie.
Well, it's not just catering to the lowest common denominator. It's not just cooking with butter and sugar, where it's just like, let's throw tons of humor, tons of CGI,
Right.
like of course there is jokes, of course there is CGI, of course there is spectacle, but at its core, it's telling this story about a nation trying to hold it together.
Yeah.
And about people trying to hold it together. And it actually lets that be front and center. It doesn't let we got to entertain, we got to just throw so many jokes. It doesn't do that.
Right. I mean, it just felt like everyone was on their A game. There wasn't a single performance that I felt was out of place in this movie. It all felt like it was building into the main story. It didn't feel like anyone was like the gag character or anything like that.
Well, in the nature of the story also lends itself to just people being able to kind of tee off. Because it is so emotional, you get a lot of big emotional performances.
I think what I also enjoyed the most about this experience, just seeing it in theater, was you could hear a pin drop during these serious moments. It wasn't that kind of like awkward pause, like everyone's waiting for the next joke. It
lets those sequences play out. It lets you feel what you're supposed to feel, and the audience, you absolutely are like processing everything.
It's also, this is going to sound so weird, but it's also like when you have that feeling of you're at a funeral or you're at a serious event and you're with someone who has experienced that loss and you don't know what to do because you don't know what you can do for them.
Yeah.
That's what I felt watching these people on, like, performing. It felt like there's nothing I can do. I can't console this person. Like, it actually felt like, oh, wow, this feels emotional.
Right. Oh, and you have to just think, I mean, we didn't know him personally, but they did.
Right, yeah.
And they created the previous film with him. And so you just feel that in the experience of watching the movie. All that emotion is actually there on display. And they don't break the tension with jokes. They let the moments play. You just kind of sit in a lot of really heaviness, as you should.
Yeah, 100%. It was, I don't know, it just felt very intentional. I think it's the best way to describe this movie. Is it just felt like there wasn't, I think we were talking, you said like just kind of like a panel, right? It wasn't written by a panel. It felt like it was being written and directed by people who actually cared about it, who very organic, very involved in the process. It's probably one of my favorite. It's definitely one of my top 5 films of the year. I was just blown away at the end of the day. It just felt like, as a Marvel fan and as someone who's been reading the comics and someone who has seen Namor in the comics, seeing him introduced, as well as seeing the political tension between Wakanda and Atlantis, like, just played out on screen, was just so rewarding. It felt like they did it justice.
And as someone that's been very frustrated with Phase 4, it feels like, man, I don't like a lot of what they're doing. They ended on a high note.
100%.
Real quick, before I give you my final thoughts, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know what's your excitement level for Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and what are your feelings on Phase 4 in general? Also, be on the lookout over the next couple of weeks. I'll be updating all of my major rankings for the year 2022. It's been a year since I updated my ranking of all the movies and TV shows and specials and shorts together, as well as the heroes, the villains, and some other fun stuff that's going to be coming over the next couple of weeks. Despite having to create this film under the worst possible context, they managed to make a film that is a proper follow-up to the first Black Panther, while also honoring the legacy of Chadwick Boseman and T'Challa they ended Phase 4 absolutely on a high note. Overall, I'm giving it an A- on the entertainment scale, a 9.2 out of 10, and this is a must-see film for comic book movie fans. If you enjoyed this video, I've done a whole lot more like it. You can check some of those out right over there. Be sure to come back over the next week where I'm going to be updating my major MCU rankings for the year 2022. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much. Bye-bye.